So as you're trickling in, everyone, welcome. Would love to kick us off by just asking you to type into the chat, what question do you hope to have answered today as it relates to the OneGoal classroom model? All right, and as we let folks trickle in, I'm going to be recording this webinar, and so I just want to name that because there may be folks, excuse me, who, whoa, I'll leave it there. There may be folks who aren't able to attend, and so we want to make sure that they have access to this information. Welcome, everyone. My name is Patty Diaz-Andrade, and I am the Chief Impact Officer here at OneGoal. I am joined by a few of my colleagues, one of whom will also present, and I'll pause so that he can introduce himself.
My name is Kirat Doshi. I've been at OneGoal for about 4 years, and I lead our program design team here at the organization.
So welcome, everyone. Hopefully you'll see some familiar faces or names in both the Zoom and in the participant list. Your leadership coaches are here, Andy Schmitz, who many of you know, as well as Alexander Hahn. And we're excited to welcome you. We're gonna spend the next 45 minutes or so sharing a lot of information with you about the OneGoal classroom model. And so I'd invite you, obviously, to add questions in the chat. This should be an interactive discussion. And in fact, we're going to pause along the way to ask you questions and to hear from you so that we make sure that you're getting the information that you hope to get. And so thank you all for those of you who engaged in the welcome question, which was, what questions do you have about the classroom model that you hope will be answered? Some of them were, how is year 3 different from year 4? Does the course include any supervised college visits? I'm curious how this trickles into classroom to impact student planning and success. And can you share data on the % of students who took the course and then graduated from college? All really phenomenal questions, and we're going to answer them throughout this webinar, and we're just super excited to have you join us because I think that this will mark, a transition for some of you in this partnership to really directly impact young people's lives, which is something that we at OneGoal have been engaging in for many years. And last question is, do students earn credit for class? All really good questions. What basic structures and curriculum resources? We're going to dig into all of that. So I'm excited that these are the questions that you're asking because this webinar will hopefully answer them. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off with just a few introductory slides, and then Kirat will do most of the sharing because Kirat and his team are actually the folks who design much of the student-facing curriculum and programming, and so he'll be able to tell you exactly what that entails. And I started with this slide, which for many of you is probably very familiar. If you're a school counselor actually on the call, you probably know this statistic all too well, which is that the average counselor to student ratio is about 579 to 1. And that translates to about 38 minutes on average of advising for high school seniors in low-income communities. And I think we all know that that's just not enough. And so this work, this partnership with each of you is about imagining a world where every student in your community, in your district, were affirmed, were engaged, and supported in reaching their greatest post-secondary ambitions so that we really flip that number, and that number is quadrupled, right? Like students are getting so much more advising than they currently are. I'll ground us in just the dual track strategy that defines this partnership with you. So the first is the professional learning for school and district leaders. This is the work that you've already kicked off. So this is the work that you're doing in partnership with the leadership coaches that have either already had the kickoff meetings or even engaged some of you all in the actual rubric self-assessment that you've started to do. That work will continue, right? Because it is these two tracks. We will continue, and you will continue to work with your leadership coaches to ensure that the vision that you are aligning around for equitable post-secondary success continues to evolve, that there's a continuous monitoring system to ensure that you're achieving your goals, and that you and your team are feeling good about the progress that you're making in support or with the support of your leadership coach. The second track, which is what this webinar is about, is the classroom model. And so this is the piece that much of OneGoal's work over the past 15 years has been rooted in. And it is essentially the direct and intrusive intervention that provides direct support to students. This model is delivered as part of junior and senior year of high school, and then students continue to receive support that first year of post-secondary. And we're going to dig into this a little bit, but I want to name that support to post-secondary path of choice is critical for us, because this isn't just advising for young people who want a 2 or a 4-year degree. Actually, it is advising for young people who may want that, but may also have a credit in their mind, or excuse me, a market relevant credential in their mind that they want to pursue. Something that is maybe does not require a 2 or 4-year degree, but still allows that young person to achieve economic freedom, right? And so this is important for us, because one of the things we've learned through our work is that if a young person is not invested in their choice, they will not persist. And so we do a lot of work during this curriculum in high school to ensure that young people understand their interests, understand how that connects to pathways, and then ensure that they're planning against that. And Kirath is going to get into that and explain that in a minute. So I'm going to toss it to Kirath now. And please, as I said earlier, jot down, put your questions in the chat. We have folks monitoring, and let's make sure to get your questions answered.
Thanks, Patty. Thumbs up if everyone can hear me okay? Sounds good, perfect. We've all done Zoom before, so we all know what's going on. Appreciate that. A quick heads up as I talk, I'm gonna ask folks to come off of mute and share a bit at periodic points over the course of this presentation. This is really a space to make sure you get what you need out of this space, and so we'll try to make sure it's tailored to you. I appreciate the questions that have already come in. I'm going to start off by sharing how we think about our program, and then I'm going to talk through the details of the program itself. When we designed this program, at the start of it, we had students at the design table. We wanted the folks that were going to be impacted most by this work to design the program side by side with us. And so what you're seeing on the slide here are 3 choices that we've made in the program model that are directly informed by what students have told us. And so I'll talk to through them in a second. If you ask students what they need when they're thinking about life after high school, and while they're sitting in high school and thinking about planning for life after high school, if there's 10 things that they name, the top 9 will be, I need someone in my corner. I need someone at the table with me that's willing to support me and help me think through this. And so a big part of the OneGoal classroom model is to, as Patty shared, increase the amount of one-on-one advising time students get to plan for their post-secondary life. And so as a part of the classroom experience, what you will see is we do a heavy emphasis on one-on-one advising spaces between the teacher that leads that course and the student. Students also have agency to chart their course, because we know there are a certain percentage of students that want to pursue a 2 or 4-year college pathway. There are also certain percentage of students that want to pursue a career credential, a technical certification program, some that want to go directly to the workforce, some that want to enter the military. And our goal in designing this program has always been to make sure we are tailoring our program so that students can have agency to chart their course. The number one barrier students face once they arrive at that post-secondary program, or deciding where to enroll in a post-secondary program or a workforce position, is the financial barriers. That's the number one barrier that we hear from our students time and time again. And so we focus a lot of the program, especially in our junior and senior years, around financial freedom and helping students gain financial literacy, understanding how to think about loans, how to think about applying for financial aid and scholarships, how to think about credit scores and other things that come up when you think about financial literacy. And so it's a big area of our program that we try to pepper in throughout the experience so that students have a way to build some of that knowledge. Next slide. All right. A few kind of basics around the model, and we'll get into some of the details around the scope and sequence. This classroom model happens during the school day. The reason for that is it's a time where it's the most equitable way to deliver post-secondary planning resources for students. And so what we do is we highly recommend that this is a course during the school day. We can talk to that throughout later in this webinar and see if there's questions that come up there. This course is taught by an educator in your building. And this is a 3-year program. The first 2 years are happening during their high school experience in their junior and senior year. That third year is a time where OneGoal will continue to support those students as they make that transition. The reason for the 3 years are 2 big reasons. One, the summer after students graduate from high school is the single most highest point of attrition for when students do say that they want to do a post-secondary program, but don't actually show up. We call that summer melt. And so we support them through that summer. The second highest point of attrition for why students don't ultimately earn a post-secondary degree or credential is because they show up to their place of credentialing or their place of, to get a degree. They look around and they feel like nobody looks like them, that they don't feel like they belong. They feel like they're out of place and they stop out or drop out. And so this is a 3-year model that helps students get through those highest points of attrition. This course is typically a 2-semester per year course, so 2 semesters in junior year, 2 semesters in senior year. Next slide. All right, I'm not going to speak to all of the things on this slide. You can read it, but I want to highlight a couple of things. This course really does emphasize the idea of students getting mentoring, students getting advice for their own post-secondary planning process. We do leverage a tech-enabled learning platform so that the content isn't the thing that teachers are trying to wrap their head around. That is all content that we prepare for them, and we provide the training so that they're on-ramped onto it. And then the third thing that I'll name here is the curriculum is grounded in student voices. Everything that you see in our scope and sequence coming up is because students have regularly told us, these are the things that I feel like I need as I'm navigating my post-secondary planning process. We've talked to alumni, students that have successfully completed, students that have dropped out, to understand what are the gaps and what are the successes in the program. We've continued to evolve it to what you're going to see today. I'm going to pause here. I know there's questions coming in the chat. Alexander or Patty, do you want to share some questions that are most important at this point in the presentation?
Yeah, so one question that just came in actually is just the target population of students and how schools should start to think about scheduling. I know we're going to talk about it later, but if you wanted to voice over. And then the second was whether or not SAT and ACT prep are included. And you all, I know we have other questions. We're 100% going to get to all of them, but those are the 2 that I'll just highlight for now.
Yeah, the
second
second one is
later. You can hold. That's cool. It was just as they're coming in, I'm throwing them down so I don't forget them.
No worries.
Yep.
Regarding SAT and ACT preparation, the short answer is yes. For a large percentage of the students, that is an important part of their post-secondary planning process. Even for students that are considering post-secondary programs like 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, but aren't sure yet, we do include the SAT, ACT prep as part of the program. There's multiple attempts at it. It's not just a one and done. There's a pedagogical reason for why, but in short, the answer there is yes. Target audience, really, it's dependent on the way a school wants to deploy the program. Just so you have it, we have some of our schools that go and enroll all of their juniors and all of their seniors in the program. And so it goes in what we call wall-to-wall. All students get the benefit of the OneGoal experience. Some schools choose to select students to enroll in the program. When schools do select certain students, they typically end up choosing students that are between the 2.0 and 3.0 GPA level. These are students that are often overlooked by post-secondary preparedness programs or are not getting other intervention supports for academic support. So that 2.0 to 3.0 has typically been the sweet spot when schools select students to be in the program.
I'll answer one other question, Kira, and then we can keep going. There were a few questions about impact and whether or not we know what happens once young people leave. First thing I'll name is that this is exactly why the work that you're doing with guide ads and analytics and the work that your leadership coaches are doing to help map district data against NSC data is so critical, because we track that. We want to know what happens to students when they leave and what are the persistence and completion rates for these communities. And so that you have it, our OneGoal fellows across regions, and our regions currently, right, are places like Chicago, Houston, New York, Boston, the Bay Area, and Atlanta. 99% of young people will graduate high school within 4 years. 84% of those young people will seamlessly enroll into their post-secondary option. So directly addressing what Kirat mentioned earlier around summer melt. And 75% of those young people will persist into a second or third year of their post-secondary pathway. I will name that completion data because OneGoal's history is relatively new in about half of our regions. It's largely rooted in Houston, Chicago, and more recently, New York City data. In places like Houston, we have seen our completion data be twice that of the average for the young people in Houston that are not a part of OneGoal. And in Houston's most recent data, the completion rate was about 40%. Now, for anyone outside of education who hears that, right, they might say that's incredibly low. But I think we know that 40% for young people who typically are not on a pathway for post-secondary success is pretty remarkable, especially when the counterfactual in a place like Houston is something like 22%. So hopefully that offers you all a little bit of perspective on some of the outcomes that we track. I'll toss it back to you, Kira.
Thanks. I was in a classroom yesterday talking about what you're seeing on the slide right now called quality enrollment. When you get into this 16-year-old's mind sitting in a junior year classroom and for the first time really thinking about like their post-secondary planning process, one of the students shared yesterday, before I thought about this idea of quality enrollment, all I thought about is I need to go to a big name program. So this is a person that wants to go to a post-secondary 2 or 4 year university. And in their head, they were, I need to go to a big name program. And what we try to introduce in the OneGoal curriculum is the idea that enrolling is not as strong as enrolling in a quality program for you. When we say quality program, that means 4 things. 1, it's a financial fit. 2, it personally fits your interests and your needs. 3, it's an academic match, right? It's not what typically in this space, we talk about undermatching and overmatching. There are some schools that are, or programs that are reach programs. Some schools or programs that are likely programs. And so we look at one that is in the sweet spot for an academic ability. And then completion supports. This is true for 2 or 4 year programs and for certification programs. How are they helping students get through after enrolling? And so we help students think through all 4 of these components of a quality enrollment framework. So they aren't just going to the school that their sibling went to or a program that their best friend is currently enrolling in. What they're doing is thinking through, does this fit me personally? Slide. If somebody that's attending our webinar today can come off mute and read the quote.
My OneGoal teacher shows how much she cares about her students and their future, and she never lets us fail. She pushes us to be great every day, and that's something every kid needs. Angela Jenkins, OneGoal Fellow.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate that. We hear this time and time again. I named at the beginning of the webinar the idea that we focus our program heavily on one-on-one advising space. And the reason for that is exactly what that student said. What Angel is naming here is that she needs somebody in her corner. And we try to ensure that for every one of our students that's in our course. Next slide. And so now we're going to get into the weeds of what the junior year experience looks like. I'm going to pause after we talk about the junior year experience and see if there's questions there. And then we're going to talk about the senior year experience. So in the junior year experience, I won't read this slide. You can see the milestones that we heavily focus on, making sure that by the end of their junior year, the vast majority of students complete the vast majority of these milestones. What stands out most to us before OneGoal was implemented in his school and after is the diligence by which students are focusing on post-secondary planning in a methodical way. And by methodical way, we mean that we've organized a curriculum that doesn't just ask students to check these boxes. It helps students navigate in a logical way through checking these boxes and making sure they're thoughtfully engaging in each one of them. I'll pause here to see if there are questions on any of these milestones.
I have a question about build some early financial literacy skills. Is there a possibility some of these literacy skills they're learning could, in Illinois, they have the requirement of consumer education. Is that something that could potentially take the place of consumer education, the consumer education requirement, or is that something they would still be required to take for graduation purposes?
Yeah, that's a good question. The short answer is not yet. Our financial literacy curriculum doesn't yet meet the standards to be a consumer ed replacement, but it is our goal to work towards it, but we aren't there yet, full transparency.
Kirat, there were two questions in the chat earlier on that I think are connected to junior year. One was whether or not there are supervised college visits as part of the curriculum.
Yeah, that's a good question. We heavily encourage it. We don't require it in the curriculum. We know that there's a lot of places that financially can't afford to get a school bus to take students to a supervised college visit. And so we don't require it. What we do is we have a number of opportunities where students can virtually visit campuses, universities, join webinars where campus universities are presenting, join career panels where career professionals are presenting, talking about their experience. And so what we've tried to do is make that as equitable of an experience as possible, but we do encourage field visits through the program. We just don't require it.
Thank you. And then there was one that I think is both for junior and senior year. There was a question around, is this 2 semesters a year or 1?
Yeah, 2 semesters in junior year, 2 semesters in senior year. So it's a full year program both years. We have seen some schools try to do half semester or half year, 1 year, half year, the other year. To be perfectly honest, it's led to poorer results. And so we heavily encourage having the students fully engaged. Again, I'm not going to read this slide. This is for folks that love scope and sequence. This is how we structure the scope and sequence of our course over the course of junior year. We organize them into what we call zones, orienting students through the program, building community in the classroom, helping students explore career paths. All of this starts with understanding your own identity, your own values, your own interests, and the rest of the program unfolds from there. And so you'll see the first part of the first year is heavily focused on understanding who you are, understanding where you are in your post-secondary planning process, building community with your peers, building community very much with your teacher, and starting to explore career paths that are interesting to you, knowing all well that that's going to change. So we revisit career planning, the idea of career choices, multiple times through the program methodically, because we know if you're a 16-year-old, whether you're a 26-year-old or a 16-year-old, your career planning process changes relatively frequently. And so we want to make sure we encourage that, but that we help students methodically through it. One of the big milestones that students will end with by the end of their junior year that we're pretty excited about is they will have a quality list of schools or career training programs or workforce opportunities or military programs, but they will have a list that they walk out of junior year that has not only been created by the student, but vetted against our quality enrollment framework, and a teacher, the teacher that teaches the OneGoal class will be working with that student to ask questions about why these programs, why not the other programs. So it's a thoughtful list that the student is regularly honing. All right, I'll go to next slide. We're happy to come back to this if anybody wants to read this again.
I'm getting it.
Yeah, mine too. You receive a letter.
The next slide is now talking about our senior year program. Again, I won't read all of the bullet points on this slide. What I hope you notice here is that for students that are pursuing a 2 or 4 year pathway, we ask them to do a certain set of activities in their senior year, because we all know senior year is the real deal, right? The process starts early and it lasts all year. For students that are pursuing a career credentialing pathway, a workforce pathway, or military pathway, some of these milestones do not apply to them, but other milestones do apply to them. Things like publishing a LinkedIn profile, developing your persistence plan after high school, understanding who is at the places that you are going to be and starting to connect with them, starting to build a network at the place you're going to go. these are all steps in the process that make sense, especially for what we call the career cohort. For the academia cohort, the students that are going to be pursuing a 2 or 4 year institution, the path is more predictable, and we cover all of that, including FAFSA and scholarship applications, the actual applications to the 2 and 4 year universities, figuring out how to navigate the places that you've been admitted to, figuring out how to like navigate your personal statement, how to choose between financial aid packages. That is all included in the senior year program for that cohort. But we do help students that are pursuing other paths that don't fit that traditional pathway. This is the scope and sequence for senior year. Again, I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but the scope and sequence really help students bucket the steps in the process in a logical way, because as you know from student experience or maybe your own personal experience, there's a lot of things being fired at you, not just post-secondary planning related during your senior year. And so when you come to OneGoal, it's the dedicated time in your day to think about what is the next thing that I need to do to stay on track. We help students track that for themselves, and we help teachers know where students are in the journey so that they can nudge students towards getting back on track if they happen to fall off track. And we do that through some of our data tools, through some of our tracking systems, but it is a methodical way to help students navigate a really complicated and unfortunately challenging process.
So let's pause there. Any questions about what you just saw related to junior and senior year?
I have a question. My name is Jake Hubert. I'm work at Harlan School District near Rockford, Illinois, and we're trying to do our best to expand on our career pathways for students. And one of the focuses we have is really making sure we hit them in their freshman year. The biggest reason is, there's a strong possibility of losing a lot of students their freshman year. By keeping them on goal and having a focus at that stage of their career. Oftentimes, by the time they get to be juniors or seniors, they may be far enough behind, in the process that, they've become disconnected or disengaged. I guess I'm a little bit kind of curious if there's been any thought to taking the program maybe to freshman and senior year, quite possibly. I mean, I understand a lot of the milestones of senior year, and why we have those in place, but wouldn't you be able to hit a lot more students through freshman year?
Yeah, and that's one of the questions you asked in the chat, which I would intended to get to. It's a great question, Jake, and I would say 2 things. One is that we are experimenting right now with the school in New York where we are starting earlier. We're starting with 10th graders through an advisory model. We're learning a lot, and we're doing that work to try to understand whether or not we can sort of expand it to that 3rd year. And because we're at the stage of piloting and testing, we're not yet ready to bring it to scale across new partners. But it is something that we keep asking ourselves, because it is, we agree with you that starting early would be much more beneficial. We also have seen some challenges with scheduling when we start earlier. And so that is something that we obviously would need to work with teachers and with school leaders to try to understand. I will name that one of the things that we have learned is that many students who get to junior year, to your point, and feel disconnected or might believe that they actually can't plan for post-secondary because either their GPA is low or they have no idea what they want to do when they leave high school. I have heard qualitatively when I walk into classrooms and also through student survey data that OneGoal changes that for them, and that being a part of this course and the curriculum actually helps them understand that there are options. And it may not be a 4-year degree, and it may not be Harvard, right? Because that's what people sort of think in their head, but there are options. And many of the young people who enter the program just have a dearth of knowledge around what their options are. And so us building their knowledge base around what their options are, as Kirat pointed out earlier, is sort of part 1 of what we do as part of the course. Would invite anybody else on the team to add. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Yeah, no problem. Keep the questions coming, you all. I know that there are others we haven't yet addressed, and we will get to them, I promise. So let me just let Kirath go ahead and finish us up on some of this other stuff.
Yeah, one of the things that we've tried hard to do is align pretty closely with the post-secondary and career expectations framework, the PACE framework in Illinois. And so there's a lot of text on this slide. I'm not expecting you to read it. What I hope you notice is there's a number of the orange OneGoal logo hats all over this framework. It's not 100%, but it's the vast majority. We try to cover as much as realistically possible in the junior and senior year part of the program. Some of the gaps in it are things that are typically being asked of the PACE framework, to Jake's point, around 9th and 10th grade, around having students start to plan for their AP courses or advanced placement or honors level course and that sort of thing, or dual credit courses. And so because we are a junior and senior year program, those are the places that we just haven't emphasized as much in our program, because by junior year, we really want to get you ready for planning. And some of those course selections are kind of already set in stone for a number of students based on where their career academic trajectory has been over the course of their high school career. Wanted to name the alignment to the PACE framework here. We feel like we do a really strong job of trying to emphasize the points that the Illinois standards are asking.
And related to that, something we also want to name is that OneGoal is also aligned to junior and senior year of college and career readiness seminar in the ISB course catalog. And so in case that's helpful for you all to just sort of orient how this fits into your work, that's an additional piece that I'll name. Okay. So, oh, go ahead, Kira.
Sure. There's a number of people that make OneGoal happen. And so I want to talk through what an individual classroom would look like. In an individual classroom, the teacher is at the center of it. So this is a teacher currently in your building that you think would be a great fit and wants to be the person that teaches the OneGoal cohort. The folks around that teacher are the students that attend this class. We ask that you staff a site director, somebody that's typically an assistant principal or a guidance counselor in the building that is overseeing the OneGoal work that's happening in the building that we work most closely with. That site director is most closely supported by the leadership coach that you all know and love well. That leadership coach is already supporting you all, would support your site director, and the leadership coach will plug in some places to help support the teachers alongside other parts of our team that are helping to train your teachers to teach this class. In the classroom, one of the things that we get really excited about is there are already people in students' lives that are ready and able, or at a minimum, ready to step in and support the student, particularly emotional. The reason for this is the student has a trusted relationship already with somebody in their life. What we ask them to do is formally enroll that individual on this journey alongside them in the OneGoal experience. We call this their champion. This is often a coach, another teacher, somebody else that sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's an older sibling that's over 18, but somebody that they can be there to be a trusted advisor and a champion for them, really to provide that emotional support as they navigate this OneGoal journey. I'll keep us moving here, but if there's questions about this, we're happy to answer them. Patty, back to you.
Okay, so a few quick things. There was a question earlier about how the program is delivered. Do students earn credit? And so there's two ways that we can work with you to figure out how to embed a OneGoal course into your master schedule. The first is through a credit-bearing course. And so you can imagine that you offer OneGoal as an elective or some other course that would allow you to sort of plug it in. And most of our partners choose this path. And the reason for that is that because it allows for the type of sustained time and dedicated time to deliver the content and to make sure that students are making progress on their individual plans. And so the course would be scheduled 2 semesters junior year, 2 semesters senior. The alternative to that really depends on your master schedule. And so we would work with you for some schools. For example, some schools might have an advisory period that gives credit to students. And so we would work with you to maybe embed OneGoal into that advisory period. Or your master schedule might have a block that is intended to provide this type of senior seminar support. And so we would work with you to figure out how to embed OneGoal into that type of block. So truly, we are flexible is what I would name in this slide. We encourage you to think about the credit bearing course opportunities, but can work with you and your leadership coach to figure out what makes the most sense to you. This is just a reminder slide because this is just an incredible opportunity, I think, for you all who are a part of this pilot partnership with ISB. The cost for the OneGoal classroom model is $27,000 per high school per year. And this is regardless of the number of students that are enrolled in the program. But for you all, the first 2 years, so this initial cohort that would begin junior year and would complete through senior year, that 2-year experience for your students is covered by the ISB partnership. After that, we would be working with you to figure out whether or not this is a program that you want to sustain. And in the past and other partners, we have had folks pay for this partnership through Title I funding, Title II funding, or local philanthropy. We are also, I will name, in the process of seeking to become an Illinois Empower vendor. And so if that is something that, hopefully we can work through, that would be an additional way that you can consider how you might budget for a program like OneGoal. Here's a quick overview of the timeline. Essentially, we're asking you to connect with your leadership coach, and they will follow up with you, by the way, to see whether or not there's interest and whether or not there's an opportunity to bring the classroom model into your schools. We are hoping to have confirmation by March 14th. And as we're doing that, we would be working with you all to identify who the teachers are, who the site director is, and then also whether or not you are considering a credit bearing course or some alternative like a credit bearing advisory or something else, right? And then we would tackle logistics, right? So we would do the work over the course of the spring and the summer to ensure that we are ready to launch this model in the fall of 22 with you, and as part of this sort of dual track approach of engaging in the professional learning series and also offering the direct service to students. Before we do that, let's address some of the questions that maybe haven't been addressed yet. Andy, you just responded to a question that Alexander had. Can you voice over just so that everyone hears it?
Sure. ISB has a course catalog that a lot of district leaders use to help them program their master schedule. And in that are 2 courses, College and Career Readiness Seminar for grade 11, and then the same for grade 12. The descriptions of each of those align with the OneGoal content. And so to the extent that you would need to align this course to an ISB course, you could use that College and Career Readiness grade 11 or grade 12.
Thank you. I'm going to run through a few other questions that were in the chat at some point and I don't think we've addressed. So one was the difference between year 3 and year 4. And so I think I'm going to try to answer what I think your question is, but please come off mute and jump in if I'm not doing that. So the arc of this partnership is 3 years, right? You're working with your leadership coach now. You will continue to work with them next year. And the intention is for that 3rd year for us to continue to work together, especially because if you're adopting the classroom model, you will have seniors at that point, right? Juniors start next year. So that 3rd year is going to include seniors. And so when you think about the 3 years, you could think about it as this year being the year where we launch the professional learning series. You have your leadership coach, you're assessing your post-secondary strategy and figuring out what adaptations and changes you want to make to more aggressively pursue your goals. This 2nd year is now when you would launch the classroom model and enroll juniors in the program, and they're starting to get the direct access to the curriculum and what Kira described earlier in the slides. And then the 3rd year is those students moving into senior year. And if you choose, you can continue to grow the program and add more juniors, right? Those are sort of the 3 years. And by the way, you all, we have the launch event next Tuesday, where we actually are going to just discuss all of this so that you have a much clearer sense of the arc of the 3 years. But that's sort of the voiceover of what it looks like. And across those 3 years, your leadership coach is working with you to ensure that the work is sustained and that OneGoal can start to pull away and you have what you need to do to continue the work. or maybe tap into a lighter version of support, right? Depending on where you are. And so that 4th year, I think, is a year where if you're continuing to offer the classroom model to students, that could, that will happen. But the leadership coach has started to pull out and is starting to offer a smaller dosage of support, unless you need more support. And then at that point, we would discuss what that might look like. Does that answer the question? And whoever put it in, please let us know if you had another question.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Great. There was also a question about how we support dreamers with respect to financial aid. I'm going to put one of my team members on the spot, one of your leadership coaches, Andrea, because she actually was a former sort of coach and support to students in the Chicago region. Andrea, would you mind coming off mute and voicing over what you just responded in the chat?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, good morning, Stephen. Our content and curriculum does support dreamers in being able to attain financial aid. We also provide numerous coaching resources that help support not only the teacher, but the counselors and support teams as well, in being able to coach students through actually being able to obtain that financial aid, that process, their families as well. So we have lots of resources. We also have certain activities within the platform that will direct and guide students through that financial aid process, those dreamer students. So we really work closely one-on-one, being able to provide that coaching and support for them.
Thank you.
And Andrea, we had one more question related to Chicago, and I'm going to pick on you because you were just there. A connection with our work and the Learn, Plan, Succeed framework in CPS. Do you know how we think about that and the integration there?
Sure. Yes, a lot of work, especially in the Chicago region, since the Chicago region actually led for OneGoal and is currently leading for alternative post-secondary pathways, that landscape analysis. So that is one of the things that we, along with our partnership team, work with the school administration teams in helping them to ensure that our OneGoal curriculum, the content, the milestones that students are doing throughout the program is aligning with the Learn, Plan, Succeed requirements. For example, with one school that I worked with previously, during those school administration team meetings, we would actually work closely one-on-one with the counselor and their CCR coach, and going individually by students and seeing where they currently were on that Learn to Succeed plan path. So yes, it aligns very well with the content and curriculum, and we do a good job of implementing that within it. Does that answer a little bit?
I'm talking about somebody else.
Thank you, Andrea.
You're reaching out on their behalf.
Okay, I think that was for someone else. There was also a question around the ability to integrate outside content, and specifically, it sounds like there's an existing SEL course, and it would be neat if the specific school or district could insert some of that into the OneGoal curriculum. Kirat, you want to take that?
Yeah, we see a number of teachers choose to do that. The OneGoal curriculum is really a choose your own adventure. It's really prepared for, if you want to play it by the book, it's ready for you from day 1 to day 365. But in a world where a teacher is more comfortable with picking and choosing parts of the curriculum that they want to do on day 14 versus day 22, and want to insert a lesson that's coming from other parts of their curriculum, we do encourage that. The parts that we want to make sure do happen are some of the critical milestones that we know are essential to keeping students on track. And so what our leadership coaches, our curriculum, our data dashboards are going to help a teacher do is identify if they're falling behind on pace, so that they know that they can stay within our curriculum. If they're on track and on pace and their students are meeting milestones, there's no concern that we have for including some of the SEL or other parts of the curriculum that makes sense to fit into this program.
What other questions do you all have? I believe we've addressed all of the questions in the chat, but if anything wasn't addressed, please come off mute and ask your question. Okay, I'm gonna, we're gonna start to close out, but before that, I know that one of the things, you know, I value as a former educator is just like, what does this look like, right? What is it that my students would actually be doing on a day-to-day basis? And so I wanted to share with you a snapshot of what is essentially the fellow Milestone dashboard. A student will log into the OneGoal curriculum, and they will see a version of this, which essentially says to them, here are the milestones you need to complete. Here are the ones that you have completed, and guide them essentially to make sure that they're prioritizing the right things. It also will ensure that they're having one-on-one conferences with their teachers, because this is critical. That one-on-one relationship, and our school counselors who are on the call know this very well, it matters. And so the ability to ensure that young people are paying attention to that, and that teachers also know when those conferences are happening, super important, right? And so this is essentially what it will look like. And then for a teacher, they get to see this, which is a dashboard that helps them understand, where are my students, right? And so they'll see for all of their students, any conference notes that are important. They'll understand what are some of the major roadblocks that their class is facing, so that they can then orient their curriculum to ensure that they're addressing that. In this example, right, the major roadblock for students is just not having clarity on the career path. And so that alerts the teacher to know that this is what she or he should pay attention to in the next lesson. And then also provides a highlight of milestone completion, right? And this essentially is content acquisition and whether or not students are progressing through the curriculum. And so we want to know whether or not students are achieving and completing the milestones at the rate that we need them to by a certain time of year. And so that's what you see here in the green and the yellow. As a teacher, you'll be able to know whether or not your students are struggling with a specific milestone. So I'll go back now. And we're going to ask you a quick poll, and Kirath will kick us off. But I'll name that the next step here is that your leadership coaches will follow up with you. But obviously, you can reach out to us if you have questions. And the next slide will give you an opportunity to schedule a meeting or to reach out to us if you'd like that. So we're going to launch the poll. I don't know if I'm supposed to see it or not, but I see it. There it is, which is just a question. Based on what you learned today, would you like to implement the classroom model in your school? And this will just help us understand, the interest there. And again, your leadership coaches will follow up, and we'll be able to have the one-on-one conversations to think about what this might look like. Okay, so we'll give it maybe 10 or 15 more seconds. Okay, well, thank you all for participating. It looks like a few are still coming in. And while we close that poll out, I'll move into the last slide, which again is to schedule a meeting. And this will be, if you sort of put your phone up and follow this QR code, it will lead you to a place where you can schedule a meeting. Your leadership coach will be a part of that conversation, so just know that. It'll just trigger for us to make sure to follow up with you. Thank you all so much. We're gonna hang out, right? We still have about 10 minutes. If you all wanna hang out with us, ask us questions, we're here. But otherwise, thank you all so much for your time. We so appreciate getting to share more about the classroom model with each of you. And we're excited to continue to work with you.